by this video's end, you will know how to capture the values a user has entered in the input fields of a form. So let's create a form. I'll give that form an ID of form. Let's create a label for name. And then you just create an input type of submit. That is a submit button. So what I want to do is every time I click on the submit button, I want to print out whatever value the user has entered over here. So for that, let's move on to JavaScript. So what I want to do is I'll just use document.getElement by ID, and the element which I want to pick is form. This form has an ID of form. And then what I want to do is I'll just add an event listener. So event listener is basically a method that whenever something, some function, some action happens to the selected element, it will fire off a function. So what the event right now is submit. So whenever the submit action happens to the form, I want to run a function. So this function, I'll use an arrow function. Let's put E over here, because what I want to do is I want to prevent default, e.prevent default, just because I don't want the form to reload every time I click on the submit button. Now let's create a const name where we will store the name. What I want to do is document.getElement by ID. And which ID will I use? I'll use the ID of this input tag. So let's give it an ID of name. Okay, that's how a label is assigned, by the way, to an input. For name, the ID is name. Okay, so I want to get an element by the ID of name, and I'll access the value. After that, I will just console.log the value of name. Now this should work. Let's enter a value of Aman Jaiswal and I click on submit. See, it's printing as many times as I click on it. If I just write Aman, it will print that. It's very simple. What you're doing is you're basically picking that element and then accessing the value, and you're doing it after the submit button has been pressed. So that is how you can do it for any other input field, whether it's a checkbox, a radio, or select. Every tag, you can just access it using the ID once the submit button is clicked. So that's how you do it.